guys, it's Sam, and today I'm going to be reviewing my 2017 favorite books and seeing if they're still favorites. I've done this a couple of times before with other previous years, so I will link those on the screen throughout this video if you want to check out my other recaps. Well, let's get into it. The first book that I talked about was The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This is a book that still I think is a good book. I think it's really great, but it's farther away in my feelings now because I didn't read the second book, or I haven't yet. I own it. I'm going to read it at some point when he announces the third book, and not a day before. So the fact that it's just been like far away from me, and I don't interact with this book's fandom a ton. Like, a lot of people really like this book. I don't see fan art for it. I don't see like discussions of it, so it just fades more in the background. But I do know this is a good book, and that once I get back in the series I'll probably be reinvested, but I wouldn't put this on my favorites currently. Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch. This series is still my favorite, and I plan on reading the third book this year. I know, because the fourth book is supposed to come out at some point. So this book, it has like a pirate setting, like they're interacting with pirates, they're at sea. It's great. I'm tempted in this exact moment, that's stupid, don't do that, Samantha, but I am tempted to reread the first two books. That's dumb, and I probably don't have the mental energy to do something like that before I read the third book and the fourth book. But I may. I don't know. I really like this. This is one of my favorite series of all time. Then we have The Tiger's Daughter by K. Arsenault Rivera. This has fallen in favorite status. I still think this book is great. I still really enjoy this book, but having read the rest of the series and the next two being not great, just kind of like, this one has fallen because what I liked about this so much was not only this story, but also the potential of the story, and we just didn't get that potential. So this is no longer sitting in the favorites category. I actually have it on the unhaul pile with the rest of the series, which is kind of sad, because I won't forget this. I don't need to keep it around for like memory's sake. But I did have a moment with this book that was very beautiful. We had a time together, and that time has passed. And we have The Invasion of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. This is one of my favorite series. This second book is like much weirder than the first book. The genre things that happen in this series are not what you expect when you get into the first book, but I kind of had been warned about that a little bit. But this series is cool. I really dig it. I like what it explores, all of that, so this still sits in a favorite for me. Then we have Red Rising by Pierce Brown, and this book I talked about so much in that 2017 video. I was all about Red Rising that year. This book was so much fun, and I still do think very affectionately of this series. This is one of my favorite series. The third book didn't really work for me because I listened to it on audio at a weird time, and I'm actually thinking about rereading this series and then continuing with the rest of the series, because the first two books of the series sit so highly in my feelings and were just so like, this makes it sound like they're bad. They were like anxiety producing. Like, I wanted to like put them down, pick them back up, put them down, pick them back up, because it was so intense, and I really dug this. Also, it's funny that I'm mentioning this around this time, because keep an eye out around, because I will have something related to Red Rising coming. This is not planned. I was not doing this video to talk about that. I just was like, wow, you're talking a lot about Red Rising in this video, and you have something related to Red Rising that you're going to talk about. So just, if you're into Red Rising, keep your eyes peeled. Then we have The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, another book I talked about a lot in that video. It made like multiple categories for my book awards that year. This is amazing. I do think this is, it's really hard to rank the books in this series, in the Broken Earth trilogy. This one might still be my favorite. I like them all for like different reasons and also similar reasons. Like, it's all really good. But yes, this series is one of my favorite series of all time still. Then we have an Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. This actually won like for most beautiful cover, I think, that year for me, but I still talked about it. And this one does sit affectionately in my feelings, but not as like a favorite of all time. Like, I definitely am like, oh, I don't remember like a lot of the plot. I remember like a little bit, but I was just like, that was like a nice, fun ride. And that's kind of how I feel about her other book as well. Like, she just kind of sits in my feelings as like, oh yeah, that was nice, you know, but not a favorite book of all time by any means. Like, not like life-altering, you know? Then we have Temeraire by Naomi Novik. This is another one that sort of fell in my feelings. I still feel affectionately for this series, and it's a series I'm going to continue. It's the Napoleonic Wars with Dragons, and the dragons talk, and it's really wonderful. This was just like so cute and pure, and then the second book like stumbled a bit. The third book started to get better again, so like it's just one of those like, the series is like a little muddy in my feelings right now, and I wouldn't say it's a favorite of all time, but I would definitely recommend it still. Like, it's a series I would recommend, but not be like, oh my god, that series changed my life. But it's like, you dig dragons? You want to read a really long series about dragons? And they're cute, and they're like little cat dogs that talk? read this. Then I talked about Every Heart a Doorway and Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna Maguire that year, and these are books that I still really enjoy. I'm actually behind on the Wayward Children series. I think I'm like 1 or 2 books behind, and I know another one like just came out. They come out every January, and I love these. I love these so much. I think Down Among the Sticks and Bones, of all of them that have been out so far that I've read, is my favorite because it's a gothic horror world. If you're not familiar, this is a series about kids who have gone into different worlds, like portal fantasy worlds, and then come back and have to like adjust to the real world. But we do also get books in different worlds and like different timelines and stuff like throughout. And this is a book that's set in like almost like a Frankenstein, Dracula, gothic horror world. Is great, and follows twins, and like it's really good. So this is still definitely a favorite and reminded me that I need to get reading the rest of them in this series. Then we have The Bear of the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This is the start of that journey that I went on with this series, and this is still one of my favorite series, and the last book in the series that I've talked about a lot recently is one of my favorite books of all time, like probably top 3 favorite books of all time. So yeah, it's great. And this first book is a solid start. I do know that a lot of people have told me that they couldn't get past The Bear and the Nightingale and blah, blah, blah. It's character driven. Like, I get it. It sets up a foundation, whatever, but it's still great. So love it. Then for the graphic novel that year, I talked about Descender by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Egan. And this is a graphic novel series about robots, or a little companion robot, like 10 years after robots actually like try to destroy humanity, and now robots are like downcast in society and a lot of them are destroyed, and he's just trying to find his boy. And it's adorable, and I love this series. It's actually a series that I do plan on catching up on. I mentioned last year that I wanted to make that a goal of mine to do, and I didn't, because all of my graphic novels besides this one and maybe like 2 others are still in storage, so I haven't done that. But once I move, I can do that, but it's not an official goal. But this series is still great, and I would say is one of my top favorite comic book series. Then we have Wind Witch by Susan Dennard. This is the second book in the Witchland series, and I know I talked about Truth Witch in a previous video when I was recapping this, but yeah, this book is so good. I do think this book goes higher in my feelings like every time I reread it. I'm not going to reread it before the next book comes out. I am going to reread Blood Witch. I always reread the book like right before that, before I read the next book, but that means I have read this book twice. I really enjoy it. Like, there's just more elements I get out of it every time I reread these books in this series. It's so good. Then we have Eliza and Her Monsters, and this is one of the last YA contemporary books I really read. I mean, I probably read some more in like maybe 2018, but I really haven't read a YA contemporary in a while. Like, it's been a hot minute. But this is one of my favorites that still sits in my feelings as one of my favorites, because you can recommend it like so broadly because of this world that we're in as far as like online fandom and stuff, and interactions with people online and stuff. There's a lot of themes around that I really enjoyed in that book. This isn't a favorite book of all time. I wouldn't put that in that category, but I would put it in like favorite YA contemporary books, which is like a smaller subcategory, because the YA contemporaries, if you put them in with the other books, are like not going to rank very highly. If you put them in their own category, you can rank them that way. So that's kind of where it sits in my feelings now. Speaking of YA contemporary, we have The Hate You Give, and this was a book that I think it came out that year and was obviously everywhere. Like, is one of the most influential YA books that have come out in the last few years, obviously around the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that was going on, and like around that time, and it had been going on for quite some time at that point, so it was almost like the midway mark between like when it started and now. So this was a great reading experience. I listened to this on audiobook, and it was so good. I haven't watched the movie. I don't know if I ever will. I mean, this book just sits so highly in my feelings. So again, for a YA contemporary, this sits very highly up there as one of my favorites. It doesn't sit in my feelings quite so much, again, in like the general scheme of things, just because contemporary, like YA contemporary books don't tend to. Like, they just, it's not this book, it's nothing about this book. They don't tend to hit me the way that like my fantasy books and things do. But for a YA contemporary, yes, this is very much up there in my feelings. Then we have We Are Okay by, I think it was Nina LaCour. I don't have my phone on me, so I can't check right now as I'm filming, and I only wrote down the titles when I was doing the video. This one does not sit very highly in my feelings. I remember it like affectionately, and for like female romance kind of books, I would definitely recommend this on like a list like that. But this one hasn't stuck with me the way that other female romances have. I remember like the the melancholy of this book. I definitely remember like the feelings of this book, but not so much like the plot, the characters, things that make like my favorite books, but just the feeling and like this sort of like growing up and growing distant and relationships changing and things like that. Like that sits very firmly in my feelings still when I recall this book, but it's not a book that I think about without reminder. Then we have Elantris by Brandon Sanderson, and this is one of his standalones within the Cosmere universe, and is one of his first books, or is his first book. I forget exactly in the grand scheme of things, but one of his first books, and so people like don't tend to really like it as much and blah blah. I went in with fairly low expectations when I read it, and I really liked this. Would it sit in like my favorite books of all time? Like probably not, but it's still one that like I recommend people read. I really enjoyed it. I do think about it like fairly often. Again, in the grand scheme of all of his Cosmere books, is it really far up there? No, it's probably like ranked like maybe like 4th, if I'm talking like whole series. Like Mistborn is first, and then probably like Stormlight, and then maybe this before Warbreaker. I don't know. Like I really do enjoy this. More so than I thought I was going to, but again, more so ranking within the Cosmere universe than like overall favorite books. Then lastly, for 2017, we had Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. This is one of my favorite finales of a series, honestly. I didn't love the rest of the series so much, but this one does still sit like, oh, you know, like it wasn't well written plot-wise, but like I love the characters in here. And this is the only series that I have read thus far by Cassandra Clare, and I don't really plan on reading her other like modern series. I've told you before that I'm gonna read like The Last Hours. I mean, I've started it. I read the first book in that. But I don't plan on reading any of the modern day stuff, and a lot of you keep telling me to do it. I'm not going to. Like the odds are very low. The odds are not in your favor. But this is still like, oh, yes, like a good love triangle. Jem is better. A lot of angst. Everyone loves each other and they should have all dated, like actually, you know, in my head they're polyamorous. Like, it's good. Favorite of all time? No. But favorite YA fantasy? It'd be up there in like top 20, I guess. I guess it's not super, super high. This finale is like pretty up there, but then if I think of it as like the whole series, I'm like, that series was like fine. This finale was like good, but the series as a whole is fine. So this is good for what it is. Again, I always have looked at Cassandra Clare's books as like trashy CW TV with lots of angst and like pretty people. And I don't expect anything else out of them, and that's totally fine. So they do what they need to for me, and I appreciate them for that. And that is it for recapping my favorite books of 2017. Comment below and let me know what some of your favorite books were of 2017, and if they're still favorites in your heart. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.